What? What? Greetings, everybody, for September 2nd, the week that is the first week of September, and it's barely even started, but there's already a lot of news. A lot of it's good news. But I'm not going to get into any of that today. I can do that other days. Uh, I have. I did kind of do my last one a little bit off cycle. I'm going to try to get these down to doing them on Saturdays going forward. But today I'm going to do one of the conceptual videos. I've been waiting until I finished that paper that took so stubbornly long to get done in order to really do more of these. But I'm going to try to do one every week, and this one's going to be on the difference between performative unity and the real thing. Performative, performatively unifying the country, doing it as a show, doing it as virtue signaling, versus actually the real thing, and how that difference almost or very well could rip the republic apart. And in order to, I'm going to explain almost all of this through examples rather than through concepts, because it's easier to explain it through examples. So I'm just going to introduce this example of Joe Biden's presidency. I'm just going to introduce it with where Joe Biden's presidency originally began. The very beginning of his presidency, the inauguration celebration. And that inauguration, the inaugural theme was "Our Determined Democracy, Forging a More Perfect Union." And there was another one as well, which was "America United." And that is what a lot of I've seen even ads from the Lincoln Project that reflected similar themes. So basically the idea of this kind of performative unity, and it's what Joe Biden did throughout his whole presidency. It was his main messaging style. The idea of performative unity, I apologize if I look a little bit, I don't quite look the part today, but Joe Biden's idea, the idea, and it wasn't his idea, it was the idea of it was a broader idea, more people had it than just him, is that we can just say that, and it's obvious based on those titles, the idea is that we can just say that we're united. We can just say that our democracy is strong and will it into existence. And I might add, multiple interstates. All of the interstates in Washington, D.C. had to be shut down. Except for east side of the Potomac River. There was one interstate, but all the other interstates had to be shut down on Inauguration Day that day. There were protests allowed, shockingly, but only a mile away. Protests for Trumpers to go to, and people who had those kinds of, and I feel very bad for them. There were protests for them to go to, but they were only allowed like a mile and a half, 2 miles away. And just a couple of weeks earlier, that very location had been stormed by people in an attempted coup. And yet that was the language that they used. They didn't use the language of danger. They didn't use the language of, as they should have in the campaign last year. They certainly didn't use the language of suicide prevention. They which they already should have been starting to really use more often at that point as they got into power. That, like, they should have regularly used words like lives worth living and things like that. That should have been a common feature, to the point where maybe some people on the right occasionally would mock it. That should have been a common feature of rhetoric. There's a bunch of simple rhetorical things, and rhetoric isn't quite enough. There's a bunch of simple rhetorical things that they could have done to actually engender unity, and they didn't do any of those things. They just got up on a stage and showboated about how great this country was, and kind of more or less ignored the fact that a coup d'etat had just happened, and it ignored the fact that the American electorate of 3 months before the election would have most likely voted for Trump. They ignored things like that. They ignored even that they barely had control of the Senate, and that was only because of miracles. They ignored that they really had one chance. I mean, it's kind of cheating. We know that there's probably another chance now, but they had no right to count on that. We should all have portraits in our house right now. They had no right to count on the fact that we even could have elections at all after a potential Donald Trump second victory in his third election in 2024. They had no right to expect that. But there was a lot of showboating and a lot of pretending that everything was fine. And Joe Biden did this throughout his entire presidency. I've talked about it a little bit in passing before, but he would always talk about the American people as the ones that he had remembered, doing the heroic things that he had remembered, but very rarely talking about who we were today. He wasn't really in touch with that. And I actually have a video that I'm going to link to you by somebody who I don't think that he understands this stuff perfectly, but he actually does understand it a little bit. And you can't just be out of touch like that. And you can't just wish unity into existence. Like, the other side gets a vote in that. And they clearly didn't want unity under those terms. They didn't feel like the life that they would have under Joe Biden was one that was worth going on with. And this idea isn't exactly new. I mean, it certainly echoes of things that happened in Reconstruction. But this idea of national unity that is performative, that doesn't actually deal with the real problems as they exist. This idea of unity, it's always been used to justify just the most inactive forms of government. It has always been used to justify inaction. It's always been used to justify continuing the status quo. And obviously, if the status quo was something that was so unifying, then it would have, then people wouldn't have tried to storm the Capitol building of the United States to allow the status quo. And of course, like, obviously we all know, and the people that agreed with me knew, that agreed with me and were never Trumpers like me, knew that he was also an instrument of the status quo, or of something worse, and he has been both at various points in his political career. But the self-proclaimed president and former president Trump. But that's not how they viewed it, the people that stormed the Capitol for him. And so real unity is actually, I'm sorry that I have been slow with my words. Real unity is actually something that is much more radical. It's not actually very attractive to politicians that don't have new ideas, to politicians that are stuck in orthodoxy and that are stuck in the middle. I mean, Ezra Klein has talked about this. I don't really remember where. I can't link it to you, but that there's a difference between rich moderates and poor moderates. And richer moderates are the ones that tend to, they're the ones that we stereotypically think of as moderate. They're the people that tend to be moderate on just about everything. Maybe a couple of social issues they're really liberal on, and taxes they're squishy about, and they're kind of fine with lowering taxes on the rich, and they don't really want certainly to raise them, and they don't really believe all that much in regulation, and they want to compromise across the aisle, which is a good thing in and of itself. It can be a good thing to compromise across the aisle, not in this current moment, but that's their instinct, is to always compromise, specifically in those ways. It's this, and to deny that there are problems. It's this very out of touch form of, out of touch with reality, with the people and with reality itself. But it's masquerading as educated and informed and just another opinion. I don't quite know how to describe it. Like, Ezra Klein himself might be kind of an okay example of this, even though I think that he's done a good job in the past 6 months or so. Moderately good job as far as public intellectuals go. He has been like this, and in the past, so he's actually a good example. And then you have your poor moderates, and the poor moderates are different. The poor moderates are people who listen to what happened in their lives, and they're very rarely moderate on anything. A lot of their views are actually, when they have, on any specific issue, they're probably going to have a more decided opinion. They're not particularly epistemically humble. And epistemic humility can be a good thing, but it can also be a cop-out. Epistemic means of their own knowledge. They're not particularly humble about the things that they know. And in some ways that's good, because, being humble about how much you believe what you believe can be a cop-out to not have to think about hard problems. And people in this second group, which Ezra Klein talked about in his article. I think it was like Trump is the perfect moderate, he said back in 2016. And he was even then warning about how dangerous he was, but this was just political strategy that Ezra was talking about. He was, when he wrote that article, it really, it just came to my mind, that is what real unity looks like. And real unity is radical in that respect. Real unity is what are the things that people are suffering because of. Look at those things. Don't look away from them. Don't let partisanship get in the way. And then provide the solutions to those things. Just look at it. Wipe away all of the categories and look at what's causing people to suffer. Start from first principles. That's real unity. It seems divisive, but it seems divisive because it doesn't seem like unity in the beginning. It doesn't feel like unity because you're actually talking about an opinion. You're having an opinion and you are taking a stand. But that's how you really get to unity. You don't get to unity by just pretending that you were already perfect and that we can just take the mean of two things that suck, take the average of two things that suck, and that will somehow make everybody happy enough. That has worked at certain times. It's always made political change harder. It's always made us weaker and less able to cope with change. But in this past, and it's always been fundamentally reactionary, which isn't always bad, but if you're always reactionary, if it's not just something, if you can't pick and choose what you're reactionary about, that's a problem. There is a fundamentally reactionary attitude to just assuming that, oh, I grew up with the American people that fought World War II and that fought for civil rights and that rejected Goldwater in a landslide. Why should they be any different now? Why should I assume that they would have been like, we earned this electoral victory? We got this victory because the American people are the same people that I grew up with. That is not something that you should assume. And you're not going to get to unity by assuming that. And so, really, if there's any TLDR to this, it's just that real unity, you're going to alienate some people. You're going to alienate less people than you're going to win over. But you're going to alienate some people because that's just what you do by having an opinion. But it's worth it in the end. And just not having an opinion on things, which there have been much worse politicians about that than Biden, but those politicians weren't running against a self-deletion cult. And so they were able to get away with it. Like Bill Clinton had a lot of these problems, and just corruption in general, but people were fine with it. But people have been able to get away with this, and they've done much worse than him. But he had it at all, and it really helped him lose. That and the fact that he didn't use the language of suicide prevention. But this is above and beyond just rhetoric. It extends to actual policy, and just really the real TLDR of it is that it's lazy and it will never produce good results, and sometimes you lose your republic, which we may have / almost did. That's the stage we're at now. Sometimes you lose your republic when you take the easy way out and you just don't stand for anything, or you don't stand for things enough. You don't take a stand against your own party. And so that's just my 2 cents about unity. And there's a lot of people on the left that further towards the left that hate the idea entirely, and there's a lot of people on the in the center that I was talking about this for most of this episode. They're failures. There's a lot of people in the center that have the wrong idea about unity, but I just wanted to describe what unity would actually look like, and it's something that involves actually fixing problems, and it doesn't always feel like you're succeeding. But you have to engage in the struggle, because if you don't, then you get what we have had in November of 2024, which frankly, the fact that we could even think of reversing that feels like it's too good to be true. But that's a feeling I'm going to have to work through myself, perhaps. God bless you all. I'll come to you with the news. I hope it wasn't too rambling. I might have to do this again later. Maybe a year from now or whatever, when I have better production quality. But I just had to make my 2 cents on that. Now that we're moving towards the 1 year mark, couple of days it's going to be 1 year of this election. It's going to be 10 months, not a full year. As we're moving towards the 1 year mark, I just have to start really explaining why we lost and what we should have done. And the sad part about it is that a lot of this stuff I had even before the election. But this particular one is one I've thought about since then. And I just had to get it out now, because nobody else, I think, has talked about this, and I just need to not feel like I'm crazy, and I need to really create this idea of unity as it really is and define it, rather than letting the people that lost, letting the people that squandered their chance define it for us, people like Joe Biden. Way too rambling. Again, someday I'm going to replace this with something of higher production value. God bless you all. I'm going to be giving you the news either in a couple of days or on Saturday when I'm supposed to. And I'm really going to be getting back on track now. The classes are not going to be as hard, because it's going to be a longer amount of time, and so I will be able to stick to my schedule better. And God bless you. I'm going to be talking more about No Kings 2.0 and all kinds of stuff. And we're in a better place than we've been in a long time. Take care.